the button. Welcome to the party, gentlemen.
Hi.
Alexandros, you're. Oh no, that's you, John. Well, we're going to get right into this impromptu networking thing. And
first of all,
yep.
Sorry to interrupt.
No worries.
I'm not sure if I should be in this call or not. I just saw a door and I just came in. I know the structure. I just wanted to get more familiar with the structure that you're going to use, but I don't know anything about the context of this meeting.
Okay.
So should I stay or should I go, as the song says?
Yeah. That's an interesting question. So you're type curious. That's a good criteria for staying. That's a good type for this call. The context for this call is the Wise Crowds design call. What we do is we field help requests, usually for meeting, workshop, or session design. And we put them through the Wise Crowd structure and recommend different structures that we might recommend to each other to use in that help request setting. So if you're looking to get some hands-on time with the Wise Crowds pattern, that will definitely happen. And we also start off today with impromptu networking. And B, if you generally want to chop it up and sort of see and trade notes with how other practitioners sort of go about processing the same information, it could be an interesting space for you.
Okay.
Oh.
Then I'll stay.
All right. Well, that was easy. The invitation that we're going to work with for impromptu networking is I feel most myself when. And I'm going to dump you two gentlemen into a breakout session and where you can chop it up wherever that stuff is. Let's close that. Breakouts, there it is. So I will invite you guys into room 1 to chop it up, and I'll see you guys in about 5 minutes. Context, context, context. Maldekar, welcome to the party, my friend.
Hi, how are you?
Doing all right. We've got everybody else in breakout sessions as we start off with impromptu networking.
Okay.
Our invitation today as we start off is I feel most myself when
Okay.
So what comes to mind for you?
I feel most myself when I can be myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can dig that. Is there a time or setting or a situation where you feel most like you can be yourself?
Yeah. When it's safe to speak up my mind, when it's safe to ask questions.
Hmm. I can definitely
Yeah.
dig that.
Yeah. When I can feel valuable. My contributions are valuable. Yeah, that's when I feel myself.
Yeah, there's a nice synthesis in there as well. Like when my questions are appreciated.
Yeah.
Because there can be like some heavyweight vulnerability in exposing the things that I don't know, right?
Yeah.
And when that underlying vulnerability is like valued and appreciated, that feels pretty damn good.
Yeah, definitely. How about you?
Yeah. Oddly enough, so right now I'm staring out this window, right? And I think that is pretty emblematic, sort of when my attention is just sort of like broad and not necessarily on anything in particular. So when I'm staring out the window or like daydreaming or like looking at the sky, I also like to watch the leaves on trees sort of like dance in the wind, staring at fires, watching waves break. Like these are the moments when I feel most like sort of at peace, or like there's a sense of like ease that I would say, yeah, that's what being me is like.
Nice.
Yeah. So there's this active engagement with wonder, I think, that sort of ties all of those things together.
Yeah, definitely. Sense of calm. That's what I take from what you said.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's a little different from like the state. It can include curiosity, but it might be different from curiosity as well. Like I might be really like interested in sort of how something works out and sort of folds together. Hmm.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and there's also a through line in those situations of sensation, right? So it is sort of like through this like panoramic view of stimulus that I don't know that somehow I like lose focus, and that allows me to somehow notice things. I'm gonna try and prevent this door from slamming over and over again. Uh, Yeah, there's something in some form of like elasticity of attention in there.
Elasticity of attention.
Yeah. Like something happens when the attention is sort of stretched out in this type of way, that it's sort of held under tension itself. And there's a widening that happens in that. And that widening somehow stores a potential energy. So welcome back, gentlemen.
Hi there.
So we're gonna mix it up a bit. Let's see, how do I switch it up? So John, if you could hang out with me, I will open rooms again. Again, I feel most myself when, and Alexandros, you can hang out with Madhu. Get to know each other.
So should I jump, Jeremy? I'm saying it says here join room 1.
No, I just hang out. Ignore that. Ignore that silly little prompt. This is Remix. It really likes attention.
Yeah, my cat. I raised my desk, so it's a standing desk. Otherwise, my cat would be right here too.
Yeah.
You'd fill the screen. It'd be just
All right. Exactly. with her butt.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So, when do you feel most yourself?
Well, I in talking to Alexandro, I saw that we both had a similar answer, that I feel most myself when I'm in front of a room, or I'm talking to people, or I'm expressing myself in some way, whether as an individual or as an instructor or facilitator or whatever, which had me really see that we are social beings, that Alexandros had a similar kind of answer, and it's just interesting that I didn't go to I feel the most myself when I'm lying in bed alone, or reading a book, or doing some solo exercise, and that it really is in concert with other people,
in engagement.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, so there's something about the being onness, right? That jumps out to me as you describe that. Like in front of a group, like there's a type of engagement. There's like this on mode that sort of snaps into place with other folks' attention.
Yeah, that's right.
And Guillaume. Oh, nope.
Easy come, easy go.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, so for me, it's funny, I can really recognize that there's something in that, like, engagement, that especially in not just the attention of others, but like in the broadness of attention as well, that can really feel activating, and like has a certain sense of like that energized state, has a feeling of home to it, right? I don't know if it necessarily feels like I'm home, but it feels like somewhere I want to be. And for me, I was talking with Madhu about the way that, like, staring out the window and like just sort of expansive attention that sort of comes from witnessing a lot of stimulus, but not necessarily paying a sharpness of attention. So broad attention, the way that when I look at the sky and just sort of watch the clouds drift by, or how the leaves dance in the wind, or the surf, or just walking through nature, like I'm exposed to a lot of stimulus that maybe there's something about this quality that I don't necessarily have to do anything about.
Interesting.
And in that, both that stimulus sort of like offers the like richness of that stimulus offers some form of like panorama view of like, so when I was a kid, I lived on the coastline on a peninsula, and across the water there was the mainland. And so that gave this sort of like, between me and the rest of the world, this feeling of like there was a lot of space in between, and that led to this very broad, expansive horizon that when I wanted to look at the world, it was through this type of space.
Interesting.
And that led to like a very particular type of panoramic perspective that I sort of take with me a lot, and I approach a lot of things with. So that feels very like at home, very like, yep, that's it.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. Another thing I did think of is that, when I'm really engaged in something, and whether it doesn't have to be with other people. So I'm a skier. I teach skiing, and I'm a skier. And when I'm skiing, there's a experience of doing that masterfully that sort of puts me right in that spot.
For sure. Yeah, and again, coming back to this like this high level of engagement, right? Really being like sort of like active attention.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, it takes concentration, but not. It just takes an engagement of a lot of different aspects of myself, and I need to be present. It's
Right.
not intellectually hard, obviously, if it's skiing, but
Mhm.
there's a lot engaged in terms of legs and arms and thinking and sort of bringing to play all the practice I've had and all that kind of thing.
Sure. There's the song, I don't know who it, hold on loosely, but don't let go, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's
Like
right.
not too tight. All right. And welcome back. And for our final round, you guys will be totally shocked. Once more, I feel most myself when. And Alexandros, if you want to hang out with me,
Sure.
then John and Madhu can get to know each other. We'll be ready to rock.
All right, cool.
Nope. And they were gone. I'm gonna try and invite him back. Hey, Alexandros.
Back.
Yes, and then there were two. I feel most myself when, like, there's this nice sort of like duality sort of generating, right? So on one hand, I was talking to John and Madhu about the way that like expansive panoramic perspective really makes me feel myself, perhaps because of a particular quality of attention of being somehow very absorbed with things that I don't have to do anything about, right? There's sort of a lot of stimulus that is happening that just sort of happens automatically, that allows me to like still receive a lot of the Dutch word that comes to mind is prickles. Like there's a lot of sensation happening, but I'm not necessarily generating any of it. I don't have to necessarily do anything about it, any of it. It's just sort of washing over me. And in that way, yeah, it's sort of like shortcuts some stuff, maybe. I'm not quite sure. What about you?
Before going to myself, why is this making you feel yourself?
Yeah. Well, for me, there's like there's a quality of ease to it that feels great. Like there is so like right now I'm also staring out the window, right? As I sort of like, as my mind sort of like processes, and there's this quality of spaciousness to it, right? As I sort of like let go of my focus and just see everything like that's going on around me. It gives me some space that allows things to sort of shapes to sort of move and rotate, and like ideas to come together, and like the words sort of come to me in that space.
Okay. Oh, someone just came.
Yep. We'll invite Dunja. Welcome to the space. We're just chopping it up in some impromptu networking before we get started. How do I pronounce your name?
Dunya.
Dunya. All
Yeah.
right. Awesome. And Catherine's jumping in as well. So we've got just a couple minutes. We were just discussing, I feel most myself when.
Should I also say something?
Yeah, go for it, Alexandros.
I feel mostly myself when I hear other people, because when I listen to other people, I'm trying to understand where I stand based on what they are saying or they are doing. I reflect on my emotions at that time. I reflect on what I'm doing. How do I feel about, let's say, something that someone says or what I say? I reflect on what I am saying, how I responding, and this makes me actually see how I am in the world. So compared to the other people, so this is how I feel myself. I feel myself like through other people, in a sense.
That's interesting. So in exposure to like the position or like the information that somebody else brings, there is something that gives you like some sense. I get this sense of like contrast, right?
Or not even a contrast. It's like more of a dialogue. I think the biggest the interaction, the more I can sense myself. I don't know. I think there are many opportunities in a conversation to understand where you are and how are you with that.
Interesting. And what about you, ladies? What comes to mind when under the prompt, I feel most myself when?
I actually am thinking that I maybe misunderstood the purpose of this call. I'm now looking what was again can you explain it to me one more time?
Yeah, we're just sort of warming up with impromptu networking and responding to the prompt, I feel most myself when. And then we're going to get into the Wise Crowds design call. So the rest of the group will be back actually in about 30 seconds. So we're just hanging out. Ah, there we go. Speak of the devil. So welcome, gang, to this June 27th edition of the Wise Crowds design call. What we're going to be doing is trading, giving and getting help with regards to some design requests, some help requests that we've got. Let's see. So let me drop the link to our document that we're going to be working with, and then I will share screen as well. So on the first couple pages of that doc, you'll see our guest book. If you would like to sign our guest book, let us know who you are, where you're at in the Liberating Structures learning journey, and where we can send some participation badges to you. And they're coming, John. I've been super swamped at work, but I'm keeping track and they're coming.
Okay. All right, no worries.
Let's see, let's do the share screen thing. There we go. So each and every one of us is obviously on our own personal liberating structures learning journey. And what's interesting is wherever you are on that liberating structures learning journey, there is an interesting membership role for you to take up and help us all out here together. So even if you find yourself as a despairing cynic, not really familiar with any liberating structures, what you can do is help the entire group out by challenging perhaps some assumptions or orthodoxy, asking some really tricky why questions is always really helpful to keep us honest and maybe help shed light on our blind spots. If you're a cautious optimist, familiar with ±5 liberating structures, then help us avoid being presumptive by asking for clarification or explanation. If we get caught up in jargon or sort of consultancy shop talk as we can, just ask us, hey, what do you mean by that? So that we can unpack things and provide more context to stay together as a group. For the super users of us in the house, familiar with ±half of the liberating structures catalog, help us out by answering the questions that you may have never answered before. That way we get some new voices into the space, and you can practice, getting your reps in. And for the minimalists of us in the house, if you're familiar with the whole catalog or more or less, then help make space for the voices of others, and then use your experience to build on their shares would be super helpful. So like I said, regardless of where you're at, there's plenty of work for us to do together today. And we're going to be making use of, for the remainder of the call, the pattern that is wise crowds. Wise crowds bears a lot of resemblance to Troika Consulting. If you're familiar with that one of us will take on the role of the client, and the rest of us will play the role of consultants. And that client will share their design brief or their help request, whatever the question, situation, or challenges that they would like advice about. And then the consultants will ask for some additional clarifying questions. And then the client will turn off their webcam and microphone, but importantly, listen to the discussion of the consultants as they trade notes and offer advice, mostly in the form of what structures come to mind regarding this help request or this challenge, and how we might string them together. And then the client will come back and offer their takeaway regarding this, having heard this conversation, and we'll move on to the next. So does anybody have any questions about the pattern that is wise crowds that we're going to make use of today? All right. And then what I'm going to do is stop the screen share and ask who has anybody brought us a design brief today that we might work on together?
I have one.
Catherine's nodding. Madhu's got one for us as well. Awesome. So we've got plenty of work to do. Let's see. So how do we break the tie? So there's a question about whose sort of situation is nearer in time, that we can prioritize the people whose situation is relatively closer. What information do we have there, Catherine and Madhu?
Sorry, Jeremy, to make sure I understood, what are the subjects? Is that what you're asking? Whether we can close them in time or?
No, I'm just asking sort of the temporal factor. So is your meeting, your session close, or is it farther away?
Well, it's between 15 days, so it's rather close.
Rather close. And what about you, Madhu?
Mine is in a week's time.
In a week's time. All right. Well, that provides us some salience. So Madhu, why don't you give us the game on your design challenge, and then Catherine will put you in the queue and get to you in about 20 or 30 minutes. So Madhu, tell us about your design challenge.
Yeah, sure. So basically, I need to run a workshop with the head of product and technology area lead and other stakeholders to translate product strategy into product roadmap.
Nice to have a little small one to start us off with.
And the context is the company is undergoing reorganization in terms of how how different departments and teams are organized. So before this workshop, the newly appointed head of products and other stakeholders, including the chief product officers, would have gone through a little bit of team formation workshop where they would have charted out what the strategy is, what different stakeholders will be involved. The output from those sessions, the strategy will be, and strategy and stakeholder list will be input to the workshop that I'm supposed to facilitate.
Ooh, all right. So it sounds like we're in a context that has a lot of sort of change in the air, in the atmosphere with
Yeah.
this reorganization. And you're hoping to take this strategy as input from a previous session and translate that into a roadmap together.
Yeah, a long-term roadmap, yes.
Long-term. Well, when you say long-term, what does that mean for your context?
12 to 18 months.
All right. Cool. Clarifying questions, consultants.
Yeah, I have a question. Is the output ready right now? I mean, do you have like the input that you are looking for the product strategy?
That's currently happening. It is scheduled for this week. It's not yet already.
Will you have enough time afterwards for translating it so to actually prepare the workshop?
Yes. So I just want to get some form of draft ready and take it to the relevant stakeholder to get their feedback on the flow in the workshop. So I'm making an assumption as to what that strategy may look like, the output from the previous session. And I'm going with that. I'm making an assumption.
How are you going to get those insights?
Can you tell me more? What do you mean by that?
I think Alexandro asked you if you needed some insight to prepare this workshop, or maybe I didn't understand well. I think it's what was asked. And so my question is, how or from whom, well, rather how do you expect to collect the insights that you need?
Yeah, so if I understand the question, it's about the output of that strategy. How will that content be delivered to you?
Yeah, what do you need to know first? Whom do you need to meet?
I will be working with the head of newly appointed product in my product area. So that's who I will be primarily working along with the technology area lead for the product group. So these two are my two primary stakeholders. So the idea is for me to have a draft for the workshop ready and take it to them to get their feedback on the flow. So that's how I'm intending to gather any insights that I may require to enhance the draft version of the workshop.
Right.
And who will be participating in the workshop?
The head of product and the product technical area lead, design lead, and other SMEs as determined by head of and technical area lead, and myself facilitating it.
So how many people is that?
Depends on how many SMEs we will actually get in, but I think it will at least be 5+ at this point in time.
When you say SMS, you mean Scrum Masters?
Not necessarily Scrum Masters. SME as in it could be other product owners, for example.
Do you mean experts when you mean SMEs?
Yes.
And my question again is, what do you need as datas to prepare this workshop? What informations do you need?
The product strategy.
Right, so you are not writing the product strategy. It's the product strategy will be an income to that workshop.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Product strategy, and then also stakeholder list. That's also.
Well, let me ask, what are you looking to be the end result? What's the output that you're looking to have from this workshop? So when all is said and done, what would you like to achieve?
The product roadmap, right?
Yeah, 12 to 18 months product roadmap.
So
and that would come out of this single workshop, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
How long will this workshop take?
I've not worked out how long it will take. Depends on what structures I'm using and how we're going to string that together.
Do you plan, or have you prepared anything? Have you planned something for the workshop?
No, not at all.
Do you want to use a liberating structure for that?
Yes.
Have you maybe collected a few that you want to pick from them?
So this is the first of its kind in terms of building a roadmap that I'm doing at this scale. So I'm not sure what structures I can use to engage and make it interactive.
Are you familiar with the liberating structures? Have you tried it before?
I've tried this in at the team level. Yes.
Which one?
I've tried impromptu networking. I've tried 1, 2, 4 all. I've tried 9 whys, and I've tried Frizz and 15% solution, and appreciative interviews.
Oh, that's
and W3. Yeah, I've tried those.
And do you like them? I mean, do you feel that indeed it's something that you can use for the workshop?
I like them from the point of view of how it engages everybody in the workshop, and how it can enable interactivity.
And in terms of this session, will this be an online or remote session, or are you guys gonna be co-located?
Online, remote, or co-located. So what's the difference between online and remote?
Nothing. Like, are you going to do this like we're doing it on Zoom or through Microsoft Teams, or are you guys going to be like in the physical space?
It's either going to be fully online or fully in person, not hybrid.
All right. Okay. And in terms of that product strategy, is that documentation going to be going to come your way in terms of a document, or how will that media be translated and given to you? Do you have any indication for that?
I'm again making an assumption that it will be some form of document.
Okay. Well, Madhu, that about does it for me in terms of clarifying questions. I think I have about as well as an understanding as I can imagine based on 10 minutes. Any other questions?
Yeah. What are the milestones or major points you will need to build this roadmap? What will make specific sense so that you can say, this has to be done for this, and this has to be done for this time, and this is depending on this, so we have to do it then? Do you have these information, such as structured agendas, milestones, whatever, dependencies? Do you already know what will structure the roadmap?
No.
You don't know that. Okay. So there it's a blurred situation.
Yeah.
You don't have this information. Okay.
So if there's no other questions, I'll invite Madhu to just mute himself and we'll get to work answering two primary questions. So what structures jump out at you guys as relevant for this case, and how might we string them together?
Well, the immediate thing that I jumped to was Ecocycle Planning. You know, here they are, they're going to be putting together, you know, a roadmap. And an Ecocycle Planning exercise is actually a great way to start that, I think. And, you know, the way I imagined it was, you know, you've got all these different pieces, and they're all going to be at different maturity levels. And that, you know, maybe as a group, that you populate an Ecocycle template with where things fall. And you could use it as a brainstorming exercise as well. That's my first blush.
Awesome. So Ecocycle Planning pops for us. Anything else?
Yeah, what I have in mind is that I think that Madhu should have some brief interviews with the head of product and the people who will be there, and perhaps not just them, to know what are the how does the agenda of, I don't know whether it's a company or the department going, what are the structured dates, milestones, and so that he can sort of already have that in mind to know how this roadmap will be structured, even if it's built during the workshop. It would be a nice way to prepare the participants of the workshop to have a collective roadmap. Make everything transparent.
Okay, some interviews in advance. Collect some input already. Anybody else?
I would suggest either the what I need from you structure, it's very focused. So this means that Madhu needs to exactly say what he needs from everyone to do, what exactly he needs to be the result. So have the whole workshop based on that question. So either that, or maybe use the design storyboards. They have many steps. They have. I like the storyboards, the way that they presented, which I think at the end they can be used also as epics or features for afterwards for, let's say, the backlog of the product. And then maybe use a form of priority like the wise crowd, the 25-10 crowdsourcing, where you could actually put priorities on all of these, let's say, objectives, all of these goals. And then you can understand which one you should start first from. So as I said, it's like a 2-hour or 3-hour session, or maybe more.
Awesome.
I would just chime in. Maybe you'd use drawing together as a way to synthesize and join what people are thinking at the outset. I always think of drawing together as a little too airy-fairy for some, but I think it's very effective.
Cool. Drawing together jumps out. Some design storyboards. Some what I need from you. 25-10 crowdsourcing. Excellent. Anything else jump to mind? Let me throw those down.
I like what Catherine talked about, interviewing some of the primary people, and maybe do that in a fishbowl, so that everybody's involved, as opposed to just Madhu sitting in someone's office having a conversation that doesn't impact the whole group. And doing some kind of appreciative interview. Fishbowl setting might be interesting.
Yeah, I agree.
And a celebrity interview sort of seems to be very appropriate in that context, right? So to come prepared with some laundry list of questions, or even to actually to poll the participants in advance and go, hey, if we were, what are the questions that you have for each other, right? To start off with that in advance, and then use that as your input for the celebrity interview. Whether you'd interview everyone or do it in a user experience fishbowl. I think the celebrity interview for me seems like the most salient, but just that exercise of like, what questions do you have for one another, so that we can start thinking of generating that list of questions in advance and use that as input as well, in addition to whatever this document of the roadmap itself is going to be, or the strategy.
Is celebrities interview one of the liberating structures?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the celebrity interview would go roughly, and let me add a visual here into the doc. If somebody can toss the link into the chat for us as well to the website. The celebrity interview starts, it can run in a number of different ways. The way I've done it before is I start with questions that I've gathered from the audience or the relevant stakeholders in advance. And then I basically just use those in addition to whatever questions I think would be helpful to sort of organize like a talk show interview, basically. So rather than, the chief of product getting up and sort of going through his slide deck or her slide deck in advance. Use the celebrity interview as the sort of initial move to the outset to radiate that information in a little bit more of a less formal and more interesting way, right? Because you can drop some very interesting and challenging questions if you pull them in advance, versus if I get up with my slide deck and I show you my presentation and I go, well, any questions? You know, chances of actually getting some challenging or interesting questions are pretty low. And in the celebrity interview itself, you have a couple choices. You can sort of leave it at that, but what's often a really good move is to invite the audience then into breakout sessions. And a question that I like to offer the audience is, based on what you heard, what piece or what thing, what is the least clear? Right. So just assume that there is ambiguity and confusion, and say, hey, which of the thing is the thing that you want most clarification about? And then to bring that back into the sort of celebrity interview so that we can continue to clarify. Right?
So you collect these questions ahead of the workshop.
Yeah, I would collect questions ahead, and then after the interview itself, I would put people into groups, ask them what's the least clear, so that we can come back together and sort of surface, hey, this is still kind of squishy, and we might want to add some additional clarification, and then off to the races.
Very, very interesting.
I also like this aspect of what I need from you. I think in particular, that feels like what jumps out for me in terms of how I might organize or structure these things together. My first comment is around time. If what you're trying to do is put together a roadmap for 12 to 18 months based on high level strategy, like the time constraint that jumps out to me initially is like, I want at least a half a day to do this. And if you can push for a co-located option to bring people together physically, then definitely advocate for that versus doing it online in Miro or whatnot. It's just everything in terms of communication is easier when you're actually in the same room.
Mm-hmm.
I like the move around the Ecocycle as well. There's a couple different ways that I might sort of conceptualize it. One could just be like literally thinking about, okay, we have a 12-month roadmap on our hand. If we just put that sort of 12 months in the sort of birth to maturity phase, thinking about all of the activities that are going to be required from the gestation to birth, like what do we have to like make clear and investigate before we can actually get started in delivering this roadmap? And on the flip side, you know, if we are able to deliver all of this stuff in 12 months, what's the additional steps or the points of sort of investigation about the expected impact or the value that what we're trying to bring? How is it that we're going to evaluate that stuff to sort of look back and determine the effectiveness of our strategy, so that we might be able to learn? It's quite a challenge given a 12-month duration. I mean, God willing, all of your players are still in the arena after 12 months. So learning on that duration may be tricky. Then there's also the additional frame, and let me just grab, for the sake of clarification, the Ecocycle that I shared in the doc. Then there's the additional point around the Ecocycle is thinking about our roadmap broadly speaking. Where are all of our activities on the Ecocycle? So of all of the stuff that we're going to have to do over the next 12 months, regardless of where it finds itself in terms of calendar time, at what stage of maturity are those activities? I mean, is this there might be stuff on this that actually is quite mature and sort of, hey, we got to sort of cross our T's and dot our I's. And there's probably some amount of deprecation work that might be in there, which is might require a totally new, okay, so we've got ourselves an idea. How do we validate how we're going to go about, or whether we're going to go about? So those two frames, thinking about it in terms of like calendar time, but mapped to the ecocycle, but with especially the before and after, or just evaluating the maturity of all of those different actions and sort of what is going to be required. That probably lends itself more to making use of the scarcity and rigidity trap here, which could drive your roadmap. I also really love the notion of using what I need from you, especially as like some form of like finishing move in the context of this roadmap. I mean, because ideally we're going to have a plan that will then require a lot of action. So to think sort of very concretely in like 15% solutions, hey, so what's sort of the next task, the next ask that we have for one another regarding this roadmap? Feels really powerful. And I think like, was it Alexandro said, there's probably good merit of thinking about that blueprint of what I need from you as a macro structure to organize this sort of whole workshop, really. So if you take some amount of time to gather together and really create those questions or those asks that we have from one another, and then use the sort of middle portion of the workshop to exchange those and make sure that, you know, we have exposed ourselves to the questions and asks that we have for one another, and then use an amount of time to really like seriously evaluate the extent that those asks are doable for us, and come back together and share that, and then sort of debrief that whole experience of like, okay, all right, we made our requests, now what? You know, some of those things came out really well. What are my next steps? Some of those things came out less awesome. Still, what are my next steps? And plus 5,000, hands down, the structure I make use of the most, and I realize I'm monologuing quite a bit, so is the design storyboard. You know, there are remixes and different versions of everything, and what you see on the screen is sort of mine. Maybe if I can zoom out a little bit or not. So I start with agenda item, goal, structure, and why I choose that structure, and then a set of steps. I think that's a very interesting way to think about modeling the roadmap based on these storyboards, because that automatically invites you into the space of thinking about how. What I've seen with roadmaps before is that I might think about what needs to be done. Oh, we need to do WXYZ at this duration, but I may not have put any thought into what is the functional way or how I might go about ticking that box of that agenda item, that step, or that goal. So already introducing this as an important question to get our minds thinking in terms of process mindfulness feels real powerful. Anybody else? Well, that feels rad. So Madhu, why don't you come back in and tell us what you take away from our conversation?
All right. Thank you, everyone. So it's hard to pick. I'm thinking. First takeaway is having those brief interviews with the relevant stakeholders in order to understand what they want out of the workshop, what particular questions they may want answered in the workshop. So that definitely was the highlight. And the other one that stood out for me is using what I need from you as a finishing move in order to build that accountability. of what's to come next in terms of action. Yeah, those two were the highlight for me.
Awesome. Well, Madhu, thanks so much for bringing us your design brief. We are super curious about how it goes. So whether you make use of this, any of the patterns we've offered you or not, it would be awesome if you can come visit us in a few weeks after the fact and let us know how it went and what you learned.
Yeah, definitely.
Which brings us to Catherine.
Yeah. Do you think that we can be finished within 30 minutes? Because I have a meeting then at 5:30.
Totally.
Yeah, great. Okay. A business line director came to me recently and says that he made this. He had this awareness with his team that they weren't working properly. They didn't have the right methods, and probably did not have the best strategy for their business line. So he asked me to facilitate a way so that they could collectively, in order to engage everyone, build a roadmap and build the head of the roadmaps, means partnership, whatever, so that everyone is involved and everyone is engaged. And you know just as much as I do by now. The only thing is that I've asked for one meeting with this guy in person and in presential. And I said that I usually work for that sort of stuff in 2 workshops, either 2 mornings or 2 afternoons. Instinctively, that's what I asked. And he said, okay. Now, given this, yet I don't know how I'm going to prepare to that. I don't know the people yet.
All right, so I get some sort of hint or some flavor around some form of like really a retrospective with some future element, right? As you describe roadmap, but also some. It's awesome that this guy has this awareness that maybe things are not as awesome as they could be. But I guess I have questions about, is that to what extent is that recognition sort of across everyone? So to build that together, but maybe that's already moving into advice phase. Sorry, let's step back. Clarification questions.
Yeah.
So, the standard question, what's the format? How many people in place, in person, remote? What's the structure of the meeting?
There will be about 10 to 12 people. What I know is that it is highly watched by the CEO because he's aware that people will be taking time to think this through and to come with a strategy, action plans, actionable plans.
Is this like one team or multiple teams?
It's one team. It's the team who's in charge of a business line of 100 to 150 people. inside a bigger company.
So the roadmap actually has to do with more than these 12 people.
Sorry,
So the roadmap that you are referring to has to do like with more than these 12 people.
yes, it's about their mission statement. How do they feel about their mission statement? Is it still true? Do they want to rebuild it, repurpose it? And if so, with what means? That's what I understand. And I have never met any of these people yet.
And Catherine, what is the problem that you're trying to solve?
The problem that I'm trying to solve is I want to be as clever, have an as clever approach as can be with people that I don't know, clever people, but who have problems that I don't know what the problems are yet, but they just think that then they are not working well enough, they are not in the good path, they are not at the right pace, they are not recognized as they want to be recognized. And so they absolutely want to make their own transformation. In fact, they want to make their own transformation with what means. And what I want to do is, how can I help them get the best out of all of them collectively so that they will be happy with the result, with the outcome of a goal, a path, and action plans.
What is the prevailing feelings of others? I heard you started off, there is this one person who feels that the team can be more than what they are now.
Yeah.
What is the prevailing feeling of others involved?
What is the feeling of the others? Is that your question?
Yes.
I don't know. I don't know. I haven't met them. It was a call, and he said, you know, the president of the company knows I have contacted you, and he knows that you are going to help us. And that's about it. So I'm going to meet him within 2 days. And the first thing will be, what insights do I need from him? And then how do I start to think of organizing those 2 workshops?
And what outcome are you looking for in the workshop?
The outcome I am looking for is to have them share what is important for them. I want them to be transparent to as to if there are any weaknesses, that they can say it without any finger pointing. I want them to be honest, humble, and to deep down inside the problem too, so that they can say, well, this is important, this is where we want to go, and then since we know how we want to go and with what, this is what we need to do to get there. I don't what I don't want them to say, oh, another bullshit workshop, and what was said we already know, lost of time. I don't want that.
All right, thank you. No more questions from me.
And these people are not used to facilitation.
And again, is this going to be co-located? Are you guys going to be able to be together or online?
Yeah, I asked it to be in presential, not remote.
Cool. Well, I think, is there any other clarifying questions? Awesome. Then, Catherine, if you can turn off your webcam and mute yourself, and importantly, listen while we chop it up about your situation. Hopefully, we'll drop some interesting nuggets for you. So, gang, what structures come to mind regarding this situation and these sessions? And I have some salience for leading up to it. Could also be very interesting. And how might we string them together, given our constraints of 2 half-day sessions and a bunch of prep work?
Based on Catherine not knowing what the prevailing feeling of others is, I think W3 would be a good fit in terms of making sense of what's happening, why is it important, and what they want to take on as action moving forward. So creating that awareness would be nice.
Awesome. What now what? Anything else?
I was thinking that, you know, if they spent some time getting each other. So, for instance, using something like heard, seen, respected, it would just create more relationship and create more ability to work together. You know, that or appreciative interviews, or, you know, one of those structures that has humans engage with humans. That's not necessarily about business, but underlies it.
But we don't know yet if that's the case.
Right.
So again, it's an assumption. Maybe we could try first the drawing together, because that structure like shows gives them the opportunity to draw in an abstract way, and then trying to interpret on how they see their team and how is it in terms of the roadmap, in terms of the product, in terms of the whole structure, and also the way that they draw themselves. If there is a distance between them, or is there a distance by another shape? For example, if there is a distance out of the triangle, and maybe the star persons are not very close together, and maybe there can be some interpretations after. So that can be the first, let's say, workshop, and then the next one, maybe they can do the generative relationships star, where they show if they have any dysfunctions, and they can come up with some actions as well, in combination with some other structures that it is suggested in the site.
I want to just, I like what you said about Alexandros. I want to say that, I want to say that Catherine had mentioned that they're a little bit workshop adverse. That they're, you know, so if you jump into drawing together, they're going to go, oh, geez, drawing shapes, what bullshit is that? So
yeah, but it's different.
I think it's a really excellent exercise. I wouldn't do it first. I would do it second or third, or once they get into the swing of things. But yeah, I like it.
Depends. I mean, if they are like used to workshops that are maybe boring ones that you have to just write stuff, maybe just to paint, it's something different for them, and they can see it in a different with a different eye.
That's good.
Interesting. So what I notice it pings for me initially is actually I have a lot of questions about the preparation work actually before the workshop. I noticed that given that this is sort of so early in the preparation phase, then I really sort of lean much more towards the practical space of clarifying the design brief with the people involved in order to give myself the feedstock that I need to actually create the plan. Because I think you guys are both making a similar point in different ways, which is right now we're working off of a shit ton of assumptions, and there is this sort of vague squishiness about what the context actually needs that I would love to create more clarity around. And so for me, what pops really strongly is 9 whys in relationship to the sponsors for this session. Right, I would want to be really digging down and inquiring around, okay, so things don't seem awesome. What makes it important for us to change the vibe? Like, what's at stake? What are the implications at play if we let things sort of continue to play out as they are? Which then also brings to mind Triz as well. And maybe not in terms of a formalized exercise, but in terms of my interviews with stakeholders getting started, I definitely want to anchor in this in really clarifying, what do you think needs to happen and what makes that important? And especially what is in the sort of atmosphere that we want to stop that could provide a lot of insight in terms of what directions we do want to go with.
Good.
One other thing that comes to mind is Conversation Cafe. This is again based on what Catherine said about prevailing feelings of others. If they think otherwise of what the feeling of that particular stakeholder who feels that things can be better, so it provides them that environment where they can engage with each other and understand each other's point of view.
Awesome. I think I like that. At some point in the day, I want a conversation cafe, probably pretty early. Like this question of like how we start also seems to be a thread within our dialogue as well. And conversation cafe could be one of a more accessible structure that doesn't necessarily challenge anyone and also starts to build the trust container of like, hey, in the context of this environment, Conversation Cafe gives us also our agreements, could give us some form of like, we're just going to use these over the course of the day. And it gives us this sort of spaciousness to communicate in a slower way, using the talking object, having this time boundary, avoiding interruption. There's also 2 things that jump out as possibly interesting for me. One is around the agreement certainty matrix, and the other one is more of an overall macro structure that might be useful once we've done the sort of clarification work, or even in advance of the clarification work. So there is a simplification that I've seen floating around of the agreement certainty matrix. Actually, I think it comes from Dave Snowden's Cynefin sense-making framework in his base camps. They've been using, or I've talked to somebody who was using a line graph to explain the Cynefin sense-making framework. And at some point, I might want to introduce this to just ask them to plot whatever challenge or situation, that they find themselves in on a simple line graph of, hey, do we think we're going to implement something and it's going to work very predictably, or are we in a very relatively unpredictable environment? Without any of this additional clarification, but just predictable on one side, unpredictable on the other, and ask them to individually chart where they think they are. And then sort of reveal that, okay, so we have, we actually have a more predictable side and a less predictable side. And within that more or less predictable, we have some nuance that can give us access to how we might go about the different recipes that we might use to explore those different contexts. Could be very helpful depending on what the challenge is. So I would definitely want to weave that into the day, because especially for people in leadership positions, they probably got to where they were because they're very good and complicated, maybe not so good for complex challenges. And that, like generative relationships, also creates an interesting artifact to have a conversation. So after we may have said, hey, what type of challenge are we in? Then into the conversation cafe or another pattern to sort of have a discussion about that information is interesting. And the other macro pattern that I think could be interesting to think about is this pattern around adaptive strategy not working. And strategy not working is a bigger sort of menu, but just generally makes use of the 6 sort of questions that you see on the screen around purpose, what makes the work meaningful and important, some exploration of context, what's happening around us that requires us to engage in creative change, some form of ambition, given our purpose, what seems possible now, working through the traps with wicked questions, what paradoxical challenges, must we face in order to make progress, on the pursuit to maturity, how are we acting our way towards the future, checking what's possible as we go, and also engaging in strong baselining. So where are we starting honestly so that we can shortlist some activities for creative destruction and release new energy for our pattern of regeneration. So the strategy not working package of questions, as you see, is sort of designed to work through the eco-cycle. And you can ask these questions in a very simple high level view with like inserting them into the discovery action dialogue. So instead of using the 7 questions in the DAD, you would basically just use these, and with 12 people, that would take you about an hour, you would expect. So have you or someone else host the conversation, make sure that we work through all these questions, have somebody else act as a scribe to take notes, and then just work through all the questions. Or, if you want a higher resolution version, it's still relatively simple. You could just do a 1, 2, 4 all for each question individually, and that would give you more fidelity, higher engagement. That would take about an hour and a half to 2 hours. Or you can think about an individual structure for each one of these questions. For example, 9 whys to help us clarify purpose, critical uncertainties to help us unpack the context, appreciative interviews to help match out the ambition, what I need from you, or purpose to practice even to help us identify our sort of working agreements, how we're going to get there, TRIZ to help us get down the baseline, wicked questions. So this is pretty scalable depending on what questions you recognize you want more fidelity on. So some questions you might be able to deal with to answer at a low fidelity way. Some questions you might find are genuine burning platforms that you want higher fidelity and take more time on. So those are 2 additional patterns that sort of come to my mind that might be interesting for the sake of this space. Is there any other patterns that come to mind?
Actually, this made me think about, since we're talking about preparation, is to create a survey, like a team survey, create like some questions that you can give to the, like a questionnaire, give it to the team members before the workshop, like a week before, let them answer them and then adjust, let's say, the workshop based on these answers. if you make like a spider web diagram on which attributes you feel they are like a team, let's say how they are connected together, or how close they are to the goals, how engaged they are, stuff like that. And you just ask them, with more focused questions about this. Similar to the Liberator survey, the Scrum survey.
Oh yeah, the Scrum Team survey from the Liberators, no doubt.
Yeah.
That could be
But
extremely valuable.
yeah, although this one is more focused on Scrum teams, I don't know what kind of framework do they use.
Yeah, it's
But it's an
usually
example.
on delivery teams. But I think even something as simple as generative relationships, right? So generative relation star was mentioned earlier. So which is just a simple like 4-axis like quick team health check around what's the sort of how much diversity. So the S is for separateness, which we think is a proxy for diversity do we have in the team? Do we have the requisite diversity that we need to handle the complex challenge that we're up against? Tuning, how well do we sort of align and listen and communicate with each other? Action, how well do we actually act and coordinate our actions in concert? And reason, how clear and how important is our purpose in the work that we're doing? How much are we sort of importing in there? So I'm aware
Catherine,
of, what's
yeah,
that?
Catherine is leaving in 4 minutes, so maybe we should give
Yeah,
her the.
exactly. So Catherine, come back and tell us what you take away from our dialogue. And
I want to thank you all very much. And I don't know, I've written down everything. I don't know what I will take away, but what I need from you is something that seems to be very interesting to start bringing truth and honesty, and to start bringing the involvement expected from the other person too. I like very much the Kinefin framework because it's so rich. I will take a look into that and see if I can use it. And otherwise, I'll probably use it, in fact. And I will also use the 9 whys. What's it already? The 9.
9 whys.
Yeah, 9 whys. But at least I have an opportunities there to work through these workshops. I'm going to study those, and those which I'm more confident with, given the time, are those that I will choose. And also, I agree with you, Jeremy. First of all, I have to investigate as much as possible. As are we clear on the outcomes of this of those workshops? What are we happy with?
totally.
It's been absolutely great. It's been very, very useful.
Well, awesome, gang. Thanks for hanging out. You guys have the link to the document in the chat. Sign the guest book so we can get you some participation badges.
Yeah.
This has been the June 27th edition of the Wise Crowds Design Call. Thanks everybody for hanging out, your time, attention, and energy, and see you around. What's up, Alexandros?
Jeremy, what is the name of the framework again that Catherine mentioned?
The Cynefin sense-making framework.
How do you spell that?
Cynefin. Cynefin and Dave Snowden.
Oh yeah.
And in terms of the liberating structures sort of jargon, the lexicon, the equivalent pattern that is in the catalog is the agreement certainty matrix. They sort of share this similar DNA. And in the doc, I uploaded that visual that I shared that sort of puts the whole framework on the really oversimplifies the shit out of it, but that's a feature that makes it a bit more accessible to people without having to really understand the underpinnings to just say, hey, unpredictable versus predictable has a whole different style of approaching that situation is usually good enough for people to sort of really feel that, oh yeah, those are very different things that we're imagining.
That's great. Thanks, everybody. Nice to meet you all. I'm going to drop. See you.
Thank you all.
Take
See you.
care. See you around, huh?
Yeah.
Bye.
Hi, Jeremy. I do have a question.
Sure.
You mentioned macro structures.
Mhm.
I'm just curious, what are they?
Yeah, that's a good point of distinction. So liberating structures, by definition, are microstructures, meaning that they help organize thinking in a pretty small scale. And the way I usually contrast that is, Scrum is a macro structure that contains a lot of different parts, right? But liberating structures, you can run within each ceremony of Scrum. You could run several liberating structures because they're microstructures, right? They operate at a smaller scale. And so when I say that strategy not working is a macro structure, and purpose to practice is also another example of a macro structure, meaning that it is bigger by definition, and because it's bigger, you can put many different microstructures within that larger framework. So I'm just talking about scale. Like, are we talking about, I think for the workshop that both you and Christine are talking about, you're actually looking for a macro structure intervention, right? This bigger thing that helps provide an entire context with some form of sense making and directionality. And in order to accomplish that macro scale sort of intervention, we're making use of these microstructures in order to accomplish that, if that makes any sense.
It does. Thank you.
And one thing that sometimes, I guess it's always after the fact that these things sort of sharpen into clarity. I would encourage both you and Catherine to challenge yourself and the context as to how much participation is possible. I mean, with all of these tools that we're identifying, even though there is a tendency to think about strategy and road mapping with a very narrow view of participants, like, it is possible to include and unleash a whole shit ton of people around these topics and make use of their information by using liberating structures to organize the time and shared attention of a large group in a very productive way. So it might be very interesting to think with these groups about, hey, how can we collect more input from a lot of people to help inform our decision making about this?
Sure. Thank you, Jeremy. This was amazing. Thank you.
Awesome. You're welcome, Madhu. I'll see you around, man.
See you around. Bye-bye.
Who's lurking? Sam. All right, Sam. You were on the call last time. I think we're going to have a chit chat if you want to continue to hang out.